On March 11, 2011, Japan shook. At 2:46 in the afternoon, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck off the northeast coast. It was one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. In the first few minutes, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant did exactly what it was designed to do. The reactors automatically shut down. To the outside world, that might have sounded like the crisis was avoided. But in nuclear engineering, a shutdown isn't the end of danger. It's the beginning of a different one. Even after a reactor stops producing power, the fuel continues to generate immense heat. That heat must be removed continuously, relentlessly. And that means one thing above all else: cooling. Fukushima Daiichi was a coastal plant with multiple reactors, built with layers of safety backup systems, emergency generators, and procedures for almost every failure imaginable. But it was also built on assumptions. Assumptions about how high a tsunami could be, assumptions about how long power could be lost, and the assumption that at least some part of the infrastructure would always remain usable. Then, the ocean arrived. The tsunami slammed into the site, flooding critical areas. The backup generators failed. Power distribution equipment was destroyed. The plant entered one of the most feared conditions in nuclear safety: a station blackout, a total loss of electrical power that cripples all cooling systems. The reactors were shut down, but they were no longer being cooled. And without cooling, physics doesn't wait for permission. Inside Fukushima Daiichi that day was Masao Yoshida, the plant manager. He wasn't a politician or a TV personality. He was an engineer, trained to see disasters as systems breaking down in a sequence. Within hours, he understood something that many people outside couldn't yet grasp. This wasn't a single failure, it was a cascade. If cooling couldn't be restored, the reactor core would overheat, the fuel would be damaged, hydrogen gas would build up, and containment itself could fail. This wasn't theory. It was happening in real time. That first night wasn't cinematic. It was pure operational chaos. Aftershocks rattled the damaged structures. The plant was plunged into darkness. Instrumentation was unreliable, batteries were draining, and key readings were either missing or wildly uncertain. Just moving through the site was a life-threatening risk, with debris, steam, and the invisible threat of radiation. A modern nuclear station, built on control and precision, was suddenly being run like a makeshift camp in a war zone. And Yoshida had to make decisions with incomplete information, the worst kind of decisions. Outside authorities demanded answers. Corporate headquarters in Tokyo needed updates. Government officials wanted projections. But the truth inside the plant was brutally simple. There were moments when Yoshida's team didn't have the data they wanted, and sometimes they didn't even have the data they needed. When you can't see water levels, when pressure readings are uncertain, when valves don't respond, you stop operating a plant and you start managing a crisis. Improvisation becomes your only tool for survival. As conditions worsened, radiation levels began to spike in parts of the facility. Soon, massive explosions, driven by hydrogen, ripped through the reactor buildings, shattering the structures and sending images across the world that looked like the end of days. But from the inside, Yoshida knew the real nightmare wasn't a single dramatic explosion. It was the multi-unit escalation. Multiple reactors on one site, each with its own risk, all sharing the same damaged infrastructure. This is where Yoshida's leadership became the difference between a terrible accident and an unthinkable catastrophe. He ordered most of the personnel to evacuate from the most dangerous areas when needed, because losing the entire workforce would guarantee failure. But he kept a small, dedicated group on site to attempt the actions that mattered most: restoring cooling wherever possible, venting to reduce pressure, injecting water by any means available, and managing equipment that was barely functioning. They stayed because they knew if everyone left, the plant would be left to physics alone. And physics does not negotiate. Some of the most critical moments involved decisions with terrible trade-offs. One of them was injecting seawater. Pumping seawater into a nuclear reactor is an admission of defeat. It corrodes the systems, permanently contaminates the equipment, and ends any hope of ever returning the unit to service. When the choice is between saving the hardware and saving the containment building, an engineer knows what matters. Yoshida pushed for actions that prioritized reducing heat and stabilizing the reactors, even if it meant sacrificing the multi-billion-dollar plant he was hired to protect. That isn't the kind of heroism we see in movies. It's the kind of responsibility engineers live by. Another crucial struggle was the conflict between central command and the reality on the ground. In disasters, command structures often fracture. not from malice, but from distance. Headquarters sees reports and schedules. The site sees broken valves and rising pressure. Headquarters asks what should happen. The site knows what can happen. Yoshida had to navigate demands from his bosses and intense government pressure while managing a crisis where minutes mattered. He wasn't making political statements. He was making physical choices, and in moments where instructions from the outside didn't match the reality he was facing, he prioritized what the plant would allow, not what authority desired. Then came the world's greatest fear. Was this another Chernobyl? The Fukushima reactors were a different design, and the failure was different. But the public's fear wasn't irrational, because Chernobyl is more than a name. It's a shorthand for a disaster that cannot be contained, a release of radiation that transforms land into an exclusion zone, a moment where an emergency response stops being local and becomes a matter of national survival. At Fukushima, the nightmare scenario wasn't just one reactor. It was multiple failures at once. If containment was compromised further, if cooling couldn't be maintained across all the units, if the pools of spent fuel became unstable, the scale of the disaster could expand beyond what Japan could possibly manage. There were serious worries, both inside and outside Japan, about how far evacuations might need to go. The specter of a Tokyo-scale impact became part of the dread surrounding those days. That wasn't sensationalism. It was what a multi-unit nuclear crisis implies when control is slipping away. And this is why Masao Yoshida matters. Not because he saved Japan all by himself, but because he and his team helped prevent the accident from spiraling into that larger, more catastrophic sequence. In later analyses and testimonies, the picture that emerges is of a manager making hard, technical decisions under crushing uncertainty, decisions that consistently reduced the chance of even worse outcomes. He did not stop Fukushima from becoming a disaster, but he helped stop it from becoming something far, far worse. That distinction is not small. It is everything. Masao Yoshida did not become a public hero while the crisis was unfolding. He didn't stand in front of cameras. He stayed inside the machinery of the event, navigating shift changes, failed equipment, rising radiation readings, and heated arguments about what could still be done. His work wasn't inspiring in the way stories like to be. It was exhausting. It was procedural. It was relentless. When the immediate crisis phase ended, Yoshida's story did not become clean, because nothing about Fukushima became clean. There were investigations, reports, and institutional failures debated for years. And there was the human aftermath, what it means to live through a crisis, where you carry the knowledge that one wrong decision could have widened the catastrophe. In late 2011, Yoshida was hospitalized and diagnosed with esophageal cancer. He passed away in 2013, at the age of 58. Japan's government later stated there was no conclusive evidence linking his illness to his radiation exposure. That fact must be respected. But so must the emotional truth. The timing became part of how the world understood the cost of what he and his team lived through. Over time, Yoshida's role became clearer through released records and testimony. He wasn't flawless. No one, in a disaster of that scale, is. But the record shows a man who stayed when leaving would have been understandable. A man who made decisions that weren't designed to look good, but to steer away from the worst-case trajectory. A man who treated the disaster not as a story, but as a chain of problems that had to be interrupted. In that, there is a lesson that is both chilling and deeply human. Preventing catastrophe rarely looks like triumph. It looks like compromise. It looks like choosing the least terrible option. It looks like sacrificing the very thing you were hired to protect, because protecting it would destroy something infinitely larger. Masao Yoshida did not save a plant. He sacrificed it to save what he could. Fukushima did not become a second Chernobyl. Japan did not lose its eastern half. The line between those outcomes was terrifyingly thin, and it ran right through an engineer's insistence on doing what was physically necessary, not what was politically comfortable. This is not just a story about radiation. It is a story about responsibility under collapse, about making impossible decisions when every option leads to damage, and about the quiet kind of courage that doesn't announce itself because it's too busy working. Thanks for watching.